And yeah, go ahead and press continue if you just got that message pop up on your screen like I did. So welcome again. Thank you so much for being here. We are grateful that you are here showing up with us on Wednesday, December 9th, 7 p.m. Super dark outside. Feels much later than 7 p.m. and I'm sure you have plenty of other things doing. So we really are grateful that you are here to talk with us. So this is the third webinar so far in our Parenting in a Pandemic series. And this is part 2 of the teen anxiety segment of our Parenting in a Pandemic webinar. And this webinar is put on in conjunction with Santa Barbara Unified School District and Family Service Agency of Santa Barbara. So thanks again. Come on, I'm trying to click here. There we go. Okay, so before we really dive in, we wanted to just go over some housekeeping rules. So attendees will be permanently muted throughout the presentation as long as our expectations of our technology and Zoom navigating skills work out as planned. That's the intent. And this meeting is being recorded, so please feel free to have your video on or off, whatever you feel comfortable with. However, if you do feel comfortable, we'd love to have some engagement or be able to interact with you some way. So whether that's by you turning your video on or by you sending us chat messages through the chat feature in Zoom. If you have any questions or comments, please do use that chat feature in the Zoom. You can send a direct message to either myself, Devin, Kira, or Raquel, and we would be happy to receive any encouragement, even if it's like, oh yeah, that's a cool picture, that's a cool slide, great info, or if you have questions. And depending on the question, we may answer it right then and there on that slide in live time, or we might table it until the question and answer time that we will have at the end of the webinar. So please communicate with us. And just a disclaimer, this webinar is for informational and educational purposes only. So your participation in this webinar is not intended to be a substitute for professional, psychological, psychiatric, or medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. So we wanted to just introduce ourselves before we get going.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. My name is Raquel Del Carmo, and I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I work at Goleta Valley Junior High. Thanks again for being here on this Wednesday evening with us.
Yeah, and my name is Devin Healy Nelson. I am a Master in Social Work candidate, and I am one of the school-based counselors within the team at La Cumbre Junior High School. Thanks for being here.
Hi, I'm Kara Peterson. I am a marriage and family therapist trainee, and I'm at San Marcos High School. And we're so glad you joined us this evening. This evening we'll also be having a raffle. We have some gift cards to give away at the end, so we hope you stick with us. And we'll be drawing names at the end of the presentation.
Yes, definitely worth it.
Oh, hello, everyone. Right.
So just to check in on our goals and intents for the evening, our topic is about anxiety and how it manifests. And the purpose of this webinar is we'll provide a quick recap. This series is a 2-part on anxiety. So we'll review some key notes from the first portion. We are also going to spend a little more time differentiating between anxiety and panic attacks, what the symptoms look like, what's the difference between the two, and what is similar. We are also going to talk about how anxiety manifests in your teenager and what to be looking for. Also some signs to help you know when it's time to reach out for help or more support if you are seeing some of these signs. And we're also going to introduce you to some strategies and resources to help your teen with anxiety and panic attacks as well.
Yes. And I did want to note too that we might use the word teen or teenagers or children or kids interchangeably. Really, if we do use those words, I mean the information that we'll be sharing is applicable for kids of many ages and people as well who are adults. So just wanted to add that in there too.
We'd like to start this evening with a mindful minute, this breathing exercise, just to start modeling some of the skills that we'll be sharing to help with anxiety, and breathing and mindfulness are definitely at the top of that list.
So feel free to take a mindful minute with us here.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kara and Devin, for starting us off there. I actually felt that was helpful for me with some performance anxiety. It helped me calm down. So thank you. That quick minute was really helpful. So I appreciate that. So as you guys can see, like a quick minute can help us just ground yourselves a little bit. And this is just a quick recap of our last webinar, which happened at the end of October. And that was Teen Anxiety Part 1. If Kara or Devin, if you can copy the link on YouTube into the chat for us, maybe some of you have been able to watch it or were there, but the link down here will show you, like, if you want to access the Part 1. That's a direct link, and any other webinars that we've done so far, it's there. We'll put it in the chat at some point, so you can access that. So during our last webinar, which was Teen Anxiety Part 1, we talked about anxiety versus stress. So basically, we talked about how stress is our body's reaction to a threat, often external threat like a deadline or an argument, and the feeling and body sensations will subside once the stressor resolves. Versus anxiety, which often has no catalyst. Thanks, Kara. So there's no catalyst for anxiety. It does not resolve easily. It's defined as persistent feelings of apprehension or dread, even if there's, in situations of no threat. So we defined that. We also talked about anxiety in teens and how it presents overall. So we talked about some emotional changes like irritation, mood swings, which can happen very often with anxiety. We also talked about social changes in teens like isolation, maybe changes in wanting to spend more time with friends versus family. We spoke about physical changes, when the teen is experiencing anxiety, such as maybe rapid heartbeat or difficulty breathing, clammy hands. We also talked about sleep disturbances that can happen very often with anxiety, and poor school performance. So those are some of the things that we talked about and how it presents in teens. We also discussed unmet needs in times of COVID. So basically, as human beings, we all have needs, and they're divided in different categories. The first one is physiological needs. So the need for food, water, warmth, and rest. We also have safety needs, security, safety, and security could be, physical security, but also like financial security. We as human beings have a need for belongingness, and love, so intimate relationships, friendships, family relationships. We also have esteem needs, a need to feel, accomplished, a need to feel prestige. And the last one is, the top one is the self-actualization, which is the human need to fulfill one's potential. So as you can see, all of these needs are just part of all of us. And with COVID, it's getting in the way of us fulfilling a lot of those needs. And the last thing we talked about was tips on how to support your teen. We spoke about adults maintaining open communication with teens and being open about their own feelings and their own anxiety. We talked about modeling calmness and validating, empathizing, as well as reflecting back what they're sharing with you, helping them process their feelings, using people first language, meaning refraining from saying, oh, she's an anxious person. Basically, using people first language would mean this is a person that experiences anxiety sometimes. So just being really mindful of that. Those things can make a difference. You don't want to define someone by a certain thing that they're dealing with. And we also talked about, helping teen engage in breathing activities, just like the one we did, and mindfulness activities, as well as exercise. So this is just a quick recap. And again, the link that Kara posted on the chat, and it's here on this slide, is the link that has all the webinars that we've done so far. We've done them both in English and in Spanish. So please spread the word about them. Like if you feel, have friends or family members that could benefit from them. And if you haven't watched part 1 and you're curious, there was a lot of really great information there. You can access it through this link. Okay, so now we're gonna watch this quick video. Just it's about 1.5 minutes or 2, and it's just giving you a little bit of information on how the brain works and how anxiety develops. So let's watch it together.
The more you understand how your brain works and how thoughts and emotions interact, the more control you can have over your thoughts and emotions. It's your brain. It's time for you to start controlling your own thoughts and emotions. So let's talk about how thoughts and feelings interact.
Oops, sorry.
Visual, the hand model. We're going to use our hand for this. Your thumb, folding it in, is the middle of your brain, your amygdala. Your fingertips, folding it around, is your prefrontal cortex, the front of your brain. We'll come back to this in a second. Our amygdala is really important in serious situations. For example, if you see a fire, it alerts you into action. It cuts off access to your prefrontal cortex where you think and reason, which is great. You don't need to calculate just how long it will take for the house to burn down. You just need to move. Back to your hand. Your amygdala in the center, with the fingers curled around, flips the prefrontal cortex lid. Flip the lid. Try it with me. Put your thumb in the middle, hold your fingertips, and force your fingertips over with your thumb, the amygdala. This could save your life in the fire situation. So we need our amygdala, but here's the problem. Your amygdala makes mountains out of molehills. So when there isn't a fire, and just say a pop quiz, your amygdala may react the same and flip your lid when there's no need to. When your lid is flipped, that's when your thoughts and emotions become muddled. When this happens, it means your thoughts are driven by your amygdala, and they are often distorted. This can fuel your worry or anxiety. So your lid is still flipped, and you need your prefrontal cortex to perform well on that pop quiz. So you have to find a way to get the prefrontal cortex to come down so you can think and reason. Bringing your lid down is tough for all of us. We'll dive further into that next. The more you understand how your brain works and how thoughts and emotions...
Sorry, everyone. Okay, awesome. So last webinar and during this video we just watched, we touched on 3 common responses to a threat, right? But we can all say them together: fight, flight, freeze. But we did want to shed light on another response that might not be touched on as often, but is still really important. And that other survival response is called the tend and befriend survival response. So a quote from the Self-Care Institute, which is here linked on the bottom of the screen, maybe somebody can pop it in the chat for me. The quote says, "Research has found that the tend and befriend is a common response to trauma or stress and involves nurturing behaviors, actively tending to one's family or community, reaching out to help others, and or strengthening one's relationships or social network." So my hunch is that some of you may have experienced the tend and befriend response at some point throughout this time of COVID-19. And that's the strong urge to support your friends and family. And this is a good response, right? However, if you experience this urge, it does not mean that you need to be tending and befriending other people all the time. We also really have to tend to our own needs and notice what we personally need in order to best be able to show up in our daily lives and serve other people. So I think that all of us throughout some point throughout this pandemic have probably heard or seen something emphasizing the importance of self-care amidst this time, right? I can say sometimes for myself, it may feel like a bit of a broken record, like take care of yourself. Mental health challenges are spiking during this time. Listen to your body. And sometimes I'm good at that. Sometimes I'm good at like noting what I need. Sometimes I'm good at like getting exercise and resting when I need to, or maybe putting up my boundaries. But some days when time's really stressful, maybe work's feeling a little overwhelming, I honestly put myself, kind of my own needs and tending to my own self in the backseat and put others' needs before my own, and to a point where my own health is I guess damaged. And so I just want to invite you all to join me, and especially when we're in the thick of this research, right, with things locking down again after we've gotten a taste of maybe like quote normal. Let's practice self-care preventatively and reactively, because it really could mitigate some depression, anxiety, and other repercussions. Okay. So I wish I had a clever transition for you, but honestly, I don't really. So we're just kind of going to jump right in to different types of anxiety disorders. We've talked about anxiety a lot tonight. Last webinar, we should have been counting how many times we've dropped that word, but it's really important. We wanted to take a quick deeper dive into different types of anxiety disorders for you all though. So there's this big manual that we use in the mental health field. Like psychiatrists, psychologists, therapists, social workers, we all use it kind of to guide our practice. And it's called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders. And right now we're on the 5th version. We're going to call it DSM-5 for short because that's a mouthful. But these different types of disorders that we're going to share are according to this most recent version of the manual. And excuse me, this little dive into the different types of anxiety differences or disorders, it's just for your knowledge and your awareness. It can maybe like help you fine tune your anxiety antennas, like to look out for children in your house, or maybe kind of be more aware of yourself or other people in your life. So let's take a deep breath. I'm going to warn you, it might be a lot of information or feel like a lot, but just stick with us. And yeah, we can do this. So starting off with just a little DSM-5 description of anxiety disorders. Anxiety disorders include disorders that share features of excessive fear and anxiety and related behavioral disturbances. So a couple points to note surrounding fear and anxiety are that fear is an emotional response to a real or perceived threat, whereas anxiety is anticipation of a future threat. So I'm going to transition on to the first one. So separation anxiety is the first type of anxiety disorders we're going to dive into. It's defined as an individual, symptoms could include someone who is fearful or anxious about separation from their attachment figures. So oftentimes they're caregivers or their parents, and that's to the degree that it's developmentally inappropriate. So That's like persistent fear, anxiety about harm coming to their their attachment figure or parent, and events that could lead to the loss of or separation from this person. And these symptoms often do develop in childhood, but they really can be expressed through adulthood as well. Secondly, we have selective mutism, and this is characterized by a consistent failure to speak in social situations in which there's an expectation to speak, despite that person being able to speak in other situations. So there's the selective component of it. Thirdly, we have phobias. I personally do not enjoy snakes, so I relate to that little cartoon there. A phobia is an excessive or irrational fear reaction. If you have a phobia, you may experience a deep sense of fear or panic when you encounter the source of your fear, right? The fear may be of a certain place, situation, or object. And unlike general anxiety disorders, a phobia is usually related to something very specific. So whether that's snakes or like claustrophobia is a common one we hear of, right? Like being fear of being stuck in small places. But there's a long list of them. Next, we have social anxiety. So that's an intense and persistent fear of being observed and judged by others. That could include symptoms of anxiety or fear in certain or in all situations. And the fear of social situations is so strong that it gets in the way of like going to work, going to school, or doing everyday things. So now we'll touch on panic disorder. And that's the term used to describe when an individual experiences recurrent and unexpected panic attacks and is persistently concerned or worried about having more panic attacks. We're going to talk about panic attacks soon, by the way. Stay tuned. And that experiencing that fear, it gets to the point where they might change their behavior in a maladaptive way, like avoiding exercise because they don't want to get their heart rate up too high. And that's because of the fear of the potential of encountering another panic attack. So now we'll touch on generalized anxiety disorder, or GAD. So that's characterized by persistent and excessive worry about a number of different things, lots of things. So people with GAD can imagine disaster and may worry too much about things like money, health, family, work, or other issues. And people with GAD find it difficult to control their worry as well. So now we have obsessive compulsive disorder, or OCD. This is a chronic and long-lasting disorder in which a person has uncontrollable and recurring thoughts or obsessions and or behaviors or compulsions that they feel the need to repeat over and over again. Sometimes we see that with washing their hands or cleaning things, fear of things being dirty, stuff like that. And the last kind of like umbrella that we wanted to touch on is trauma-related anxiety. So there's kind of various diagnoses that fall under this category, but we did want to touch on them because they really can cause a lot of anxiety as well. It includes disorders in which exposure to a traumatic or a stressful event must have occurred in order to be given this diagnosis. And some of the disorders that fall into this category include one that probably a lot of us have heard of, post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. And this is characterized by a person having disturbing thoughts or feelings or symptoms related to the experience that lasts long after the traumatic event has ended. And really, like, somebody can experience PTSD from a variety of different things. I think we commonly hear about like veterans or maybe somebody who's experienced a car crash or things like that. But really, something that might be traumatic for one person may not be traumatic to the next, or vice versa. So really, PTSD could be experienced in all different shapes and sizes. Acute distress disorder is a short-term condition after exposure to traumatic or stressful event. And so that can include symptoms like flashbacks or nightmares or kind of intrusive memories. And but like I mentioned, it's short term. So if it lasts for longer than 30 days, then a clinician or professional might consider PTSD instead. Reactive attachment disorder. That's when an infant or a young child doesn't establish a healthy connection or attachment with their parent or caregiver. Like their basic needs aren't able to be met, affection or nurturing aren't received, and that stable, loving attachment is not created. Then we have adjustment disorders. So that's when more stress is experienced than would normally be expected in response to a stressful or unexpected event. And the stress causes significant problems in relationships, work, or school. So I think that probably a lot of us have experienced some form of adjustment disorder this year while adjusting to the huge unexpected change that came with COVID-19. And so I just want to throw out there that that's a big deal and that's something to be noticed. So yeah, this is a lot of information. Thanks for bearing with me. Like I mentioned, that can maybe help contribute to your trauma antennas, just so you're aware, kind of might know that, recognize how this anxiety might come in different shapes and sizes, but really do encourage you guys to reach out to any professionals if you feel like you or somebody you know in your life might kind of fall into one of these categories. And now Kara is going to dive into this person down here on the left, going to talk about panic attacks. So here we go.
Thank you, Devin. That was a really great overview of all the different varieties of anxiety and some of the causes of the different types and how they can manifest. I want to spend a little bit of time touching on the difference between anxiety and panic attacks. As Devin mentioned, panic attacks are defined in the anxiety section of the DSM. Two big things to note about the difference between panic and anxiety. Anxiety does have some healthy and helpful benefits. Sometimes anxiety can be good, as we saw in the flip your lid video. If your house is on fire, anxiety kicks in, you run to safety. That's a good thing. If you've got a deadline at school or work, you might notice you're feeling a little bit anxious. That's going to help motivate you to get those things done. Again, that can be a good thing. And everyone experiences some, bits of anxiety, normal part of a human experience. Panic attacks get into something that is unhealthy, unhelpful, can be quite disruptive to one's daily life. Another big difference between anxiety and panic attacks is that panic attacks come out of nowhere. So if we are, feeling really overwhelmed about maybe a big test tomorrow, and we start to get upset, and maybe our heart is racing and our breathing is increasing and maybe some tears come up, that is more of the anxiety variety. We know where this is coming from. There is a specific event, and when that event is resolved, the anxiety is resolved as well. However, with a panic attack, it comes on suddenly. A lot of the symptoms can be the same: shaky hands, shallow breathing, rapid heart rate. Panic attacks can also cause chest pain, shaking, feeling disconnected, or I know some people have a sense of like an out-of-body experience. And so panic attacks can also often have similar symptoms to heart attacks. It's really important to note that it is not a heart attack and does not have the same, life critical symptoms that a heart attack does, but it can feel like some of those same symptoms. And it just comes on out of the blue, and the cause may be unknown, and that may persist for quite some time, whereas anxiety is a much shorter experience, again, related to a specific event. When that event is resolved, the anxiety is resolved with it. So just to peek at this slide here, anxiety can disturb your sleep. It can create tension in your body. I know I have this left shoulder, it gets a little tight, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm getting a little stress going on over here. Irritability, if you find yourself maybe a little cranky or short or snappy, that also can be anxiety. Some of the shared symptoms, again, that increased heart rate, your heart is pounding, and shortness of breath can be in both. And then panic attacks can be much more physical as well: shaking, chest pains, and that feeling of disconnection from your body. Yeah. So again, some symptoms of panic attacks: trembling, shaky hands, I drink a lot of coffee, so I notice sometimes if I have too much that I have shaky hands. So that can be several things. Again, the rapid heart rate, dizziness, hypertension or high blood pressure can also be a part, sweating, and the shortness of breath. And panic attacks can really have a physical manifestation that is quite scary, especially for our kiddos if they're not really sure what's going on and all of a sudden they're dizzy and they can't breathe and their hands are shaking. I do work with some students who know that feeling, and they don't understand where it's coming from, and part of the severity of the panic attack is that fear that something is really physically wrong. So something that can be really helpful to remind them is that, you're having a panic attack. This is most likely caused by stress or something emotional, and that you're, especially as a teenager, don't really have a lot of worries about a heart attack that you would as you get on in years and have other health considerations. So kind of that reminder that even though it feels very physical, that your body is actually okay, and that's a healthy stress response. Some things to help when you do have a panic attack, or if your child is experiencing a panicked attack. Again, it can be really scary, and some scary thoughts can happen. And one way we can try to re-regulate in that moment from the panic attack is by changing some of our thoughts. So instead of thinking I'm going to die, you can recognize, gosh, this is really scary, but your body is doing what it thinks is keeping you safe, and you're actually not in any danger. So that's, something really helpful. You are safe, you're okay, even though your body is perceiving something that's dangerous. Another one is, this goes again with the social anxiety, is people are going to see me, and, people are concerned about what, there's a little message in there. Getting embarrassed if this happens in school or in front of classmates. I'm not sure what that little square is over there. Thank you. So one thing that's helpful to remember is that a lot of times people are busy doing their own thing. They don't even notice. They're focused on their work. And the symptoms can feel really big for the person that's having them, but for people observing them, they can often be unnoticeable as well. Also, thinking that you're going insane or you're going to lose your mind. It's important to remember that your thoughts can be really intense in that moment, but that they don't have no basis in reality. And so again, just questioning those, recognizing that they're thoughts, and then letting those thoughts pass. Also the feeling of you feel like you can't breathe. Just again, this is a really great time to do the breathing exercise, the 4x4 breathing, or if that feels like too much in that moment, even a simple exercise of a short inhale and a long exhale can really help re-regulate that nervous system, bring that heart rate down, and get, some of those physical symptoms to taper down.
Fantastic. Thanks, Kara, so much for explaining that. So now we're going to do a quick quiz, just a quick knowledge. So very simple. Just a quick knowledge check based on, some of the things that you've learned so far today. So we're going to go ahead and launch a poll. And you please answer, give the answer that you feel is best for this question, which is, if you notice your child experiencing anxiety manifesting in heavy breathing the night before a big test, which of the initial response is best? Okay, so let's see what you guys say, if you're able to vote. Just say, hey, calm down, stop overreacting, connect and empathize with them, or ignore them. What do you guys think? All right. I see some participation here. I'm liking this.
Yes, thank you for the engagement, everyone. We got 8 participants.
Yay. Okay, thank you so much for participating. Oh, yeah, you
guys are great students.
A+. You want to be able to connect and empathize with them. We're going to talk a little bit more about that here in the next slide.
Right. Either our question was easier or all y'all are brilliant. Or we're great teachers. I don't know.
Maybe a combination of both.
Right. Thank you for your participation, everyone.
All right. So let's see here. So now we're going to talk a little bit about when to reach out for support. I know this is information heavy. I know that we talked about anxiety disorders and panic attacks versus anxiety attacks. So when would it be something that, what are some of the things that you'll be wanting to look out for, and feeling like, maybe some other sort of source of support is needed in this situation to help this teen in my life? So basically, you're looking at an increase in physical symptoms. So the body regularly reacts to everyday stress, like leaving the house, doing Zoom classes, talking to people, talking to strangers. And so those things are normal. But if you notice that, they're increasing and escalating in severity, the physical symptoms, it's something to be on the lookout for, as well as an increase in cognitive symptoms, such as like trouble concentrating or focusing in school, work, homework, not being able to sleep due to overthinking. Also, if you notice an increase in those symptoms, as well as procrastination and avoidance. I know that I'm guilty of that sometimes, and I think a lot of adults are. Yeah, right, Devin? Okay, that's common. It happens sometimes, but if the person you're noticing they're spending more and more time on tasks that they usually don't spend that much time on, or maybe they're avoiding tasks and activities that usually they didn't used to do that or to that extent. So again, you're looking at an increase, something that's kind of out of the ordinary. The next one is overthinking and constant worrying. So worrying that keeps one from functioning, or worrying so much that one cannot sleep or focus. That's something definitely to be wary of. Next one is feeling agitated and restless, feeling on edge. They can't stop moving, getting angry and irritated easily. As we talked about earlier, irritability is one of the symptoms of anxiety on its own. But if you're noticing it's really getting in the way of their functioning, it's something to really pay attention to. As well as the last one we just talked about with Kara, panic attacks becoming more frequent, as well as anxiety attacks. It's something that, if you notice, these symptoms are interfering with someone's functioning the way that they used to the point where, it's getting you worried and concerned, it's a really good time to consider reaching out for support. So when it comes to anxiety, if someone's anxiety keeps them from sleeping, working, participating in activities, interacting, or if they feel anxious more than half of the week for over 6 months, then it's definitely something to be paying attention to. One of the things that people tend to not think about or forget sometimes is when a teen does like an annual checkup. We tend to share, oh, this is what's happening physically with the teen, so the doctor knows. We don't tend to, share as much about their emotional symptoms or psychological issues that they're dealing with. So again, might be time to take the teen to the doctor and maybe really share some of these things that you're concerned about, and maybe writing it down so that you remember when you take him there, because the doctor will want to know if these symptoms are interfering with the way they're functioning. Oh, all right. Well, internet, and but they're playing games. Okay. So now we're going to talk a little bit more concrete ways to help your teen manage anxiety. So basically, here's a beautiful list of some of the things that you can try to engage them in or suggest. First one is grounding activities. We're actually going to do, after this slide, we're going to engage you all in one called 5-4-3-2-1 activity that we really like. It helps someone ground themselves in the present moment. Anxiety keeps you in the future a lot, worrying about what's going to happen. It's about how can we bring the teen or an adult, whoever it is, back to the present moment. So grounding activities are really great for that, as well as distractions. We could be suggesting that they play with a pet, or maybe watch TV or play a game with them. So finding ways to distract them from what they're dealing with in the moment. Next one is square breathing. Kara talked a little bit about this earlier. It's called square breathing because if you look at a square, you know, it has 4 similar sides, same size. And basically all you're doing is breathing in for the count of 4. So you're following that square and you're holding your breath for the count of 4. You're exhaling for the count of 4, holding your breath again for the count of 4, and then you start back up. So it just goes like breathing for 4, holding for 4, exhaling for 4, holding again for 4, and starting again. It's a really helpful way to just center yourself. And the next one is finger breathing. I'm actually going to demonstrate right now because I think it's a really cool one. And it's really simple to do. It helps you ground yourself, helps you regulate whatever you're dealing with, your emotions and your feelings. And it's super simple. You would get your index finger from one hand, and then you would just have the palm of your hand open, and you would just breathe in as you trace your finger up. So you breathe in and breathe out as you trace your finger down. And you would just do that with all the fingers in your hand, breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out, just taking your time, taking it, you know, slow, pacing your breathing. And you can do it with the other hand and do it as many times as you need to just be able to, you know, calm yourself a little bit, be in the moment. Another one is mindfulness walking. So basically maybe suggesting that they maybe take a walk outside, but not just a walk where they run around and come back real fast. Or it could be even inside the house where they're maybe paying attention to the steps that they're taking as it hits the floor, as it hits the ground. They're paying attention to sounds, any sights that they hear, any sights that they see, smells, and they're taking everything in. So it's just walking in mindfulness, really paying attention to the activity. As well as stress balls, really helpful to have something that they can, you know, hold or squeeze. Anxiety is a very physical, it provides lots of physical feelings, you know, in the body. So anything that you can do, that you can use to help get rid of that, that tension. So stress balls, stress noodles, silly putty, and also jumping jacks. I really like jumping jacks. It's one of the things that I suggest the students that I work with. If you're feeling a lot of anxiety or irritation, whatever it is, anger, I mean, it helps with a lot of things. Any sort of physical activity. Like I said, anxiety is a very physical thing. There's a lot, you know, we tend to hold a lot of tension in our bodies, and any sort of physical activity can help us regulate our feelings and emotions. So, and then on the right side here, as you can see, some other tips to help them manage anxiety. With everything that we're dealing with the pandemic, routine is out the window. So maybe encouraging them to create a routine for themselves where they kind of like have a better idea of what to expect, you know, rationalizing with them, talking, not being afraid to talk about your own anxiety, helping them with a schedule if they need support, and again, engaging them in mindfulness. So these are just some tips for you that could be really helpful in the moment to help your teen deal with what they're feeling.
Awesome. Thanks, Raquel. Thanks for those tips. So as she had mentioned, I am quickly going to help facilitate us all to participate in one of these grounding activities called the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So I'm going to need you all to participate here. I won't require you to answer a poll question or anything, but I want you to engage with me as we go through this exercise. So when we experience that anxiety, a lot of times in our brain is in like a totally different place, right? Maybe with our students, they might be freaking out about a test they have tomorrow, or like worried about, you know, maybe some interactions with their friends coming up. Or for us, we might be thinking, oh my goodness, this is a lot of information about anxiety. What am I going to do with all this information? Am I going to talk with this person? What about my kid? I don't know. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is a great way to bring ourselves back to the present moment, bringing ourselves out of just our head, being trapped in our thoughts, and noticing what's around us, okay? So if you can, get in a comfy spot in your chair, whatever you're sitting on, the chair, if you're standing or if you're lying down, just get in a comfy spot and take a deep breath and bring it in with me. So let's first identify 5 things that we can see. Bring all your attention to your sense of vision. What are 5 things you can see around you? Maybe you can count them on your fingers, say them out loud. 4 things you hear. So for me, I hear the sound of my chair. I hear my fridge humming. I think I maybe hear like a little bit of movement through my earphones on the other line. And I hear my feet like rubbing on my footrest. 3 things I can touch or feel. I feel the support of my chair on my back. I feel my hands like grabbing the armrests. And I feel like the bumpiness under my feet. What are 2 things you can smell? I smell dinner that I'm excited to eat once our webinar is over, but enjoying this story. I honestly can't smell anything else right now, which is probably good. One thing I can taste, I feel like I might taste a little bit of a remnant of some pumpkin bread I ate before we started our webinar. So maybe just notice, do you maybe feel more relaxed after doing this exercise, really focusing on the here and now and your senses? Are you not as caught in your thoughts, maybe your anxieties about what's coming, what you're going to do, your to-do list? I want to remind you of something we've shared in the past is we have to have grace for ourselves when we practice these different coping skills. But this 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, if you want to take a note, is a great one to practice and a great one to facilitate with your kids too. Really do encourage you to, if you're noticing them experiencing some anxiety, hey, I learned this new trick. Will you try it out with me? Let's both identify 5 things, so on and so forth. Try it out, see what happens. Next, we want to talk about how anxiety impacts the family system, okay? So something that's really important to touch on is that it's not just the child in the home or the family that experiences the anxiety. And when one person in a family system is experiencing some anxiety or experiencing some depression or whatever it might be, it really impacts the whole system. And so especially as caregivers or adults or parents in the home, there's this added responsibility of really having that awareness of how is my anxiety manifesting? How might it be affecting my kid? Because the kids are especially vulnerable to being impacted. I think as much as we think maybe they won't notice, I think they do. We could probably maybe think back to our own childhood and times that we think our parents or caregivers maybe thought we didn't catch that one thing that they did when they were angry or anxious, but we really did. So I want to invite you all to practice mindfulness in how your anxiety might be impacting them. Some ways to do so. Accept your boundaries and limits. We'll never be perfect. Nobody will. So know what you can and can't handle. Find your peace. What are activities or self-care practices you can do to bring yourself that peace when you feel you're not in a peaceful moment? Include your partner. Include other people in your life when you're feeling anxious. Allow others to help you. So yeah, like whether you have that go-to family member or friend who you can go to when you're feeling really anxious to vent to, really encourage you to maybe try that out. Try confiding in somebody. It's probably not always appropriate to vent to your kid when you're experiencing a lot of anxiety, but you can invite them in to help you in other ways, maybe taking on some other tasks in the home, or yeah, maybe modeling to them even. Hey, if they ask you for help studying for their tests, hey, you know what? I am experiencing a lot of anxiety right now. I'm feeling really irritable and on edge. Can you go ask your sibling or your other parent to help you out with this studying? Because honestly, I don't think I'm in the best place to do so. Yeah, what would it look like for you to model that? Give yourself grace. Have animals around, give them hugs, let them love you, let them comfort you when they notice when you're anxious. They totally do, right? Accept your bad anxiety days. We all have them. So what would it look like for you to accept it when it happens, rather than kind of maybe being frustrated when you're with yourself when they do happen?
So we've touched on, thank you, Devin. Those were some really great tips for incorporating. So we've touched on, in our poll, one of our recommendations, our first kind of response is connecting with your child and empathizing. So when you're noticing your child feeling something, and this goes for several other things, not just anxiety, but maybe you notice your child's having a bad day, maybe your kiddo seems a little sad, or just something feels off to you. A good place to start is always to connect and just kind of be present with them and acknowledge, hey, I'm noticing something, and just be with them in that, and maybe not try to change it or control it for them, but just kind of acknowledge and connect with them where they're at the moment. And then to emphasize, validate, and reflect that emotion to them. We do have some phrases here that can be handy to help you emphasize, validate, and reflect those emotions back to your kids. You must feel so, whatever the feeling is. I wish you didn't have to go through this. No wonder you're upset. That would be scary. How irritating. Oh, wow, that must have really hurt your feelings. I would have trouble coping with that too, if you can relate to them as well and maybe share a similar experience where you felt something similar to what they're experiencing. What a surprise. And then, I threw in a couple positive ones because this is also something we can do when our kiddos are having a great day or they're having a really good moment, like, oh, this is so exciting, tell me more about it. And we can do these things in positive emotional experiences as well. And then these are some specific tips for COVID. I did want to mention, as you know, we are all school counselors in different secondary schools in Santa Barbara High School. And when the kids do come to us and start counseling services, part of our intake process, we are doing a COVID stress screener with our students as well. So we are taking some extra steps to address any of the stress that may be coming from this pandemic and what we're experiencing, in addition to just the general stress of being a teenager. But again, we've touched on some of these, maintaining a daily routine. Everybody's lives have changed, and so recreating a new routine, staying connected, spending more time on the phone, finding ways to connect in new ways, since we're not seeing each other in person the ways we used to. Limit the amount of time you talk about or watch news or social media. I think this is a huge one. I know I personally struggle with this, spending more time isolated and alone. I am looking for those connections, and it's so easy to hop on Facebook or Instagram and just scroll through. And that's really not a connection. That can be, more of a distraction and actually encourage the feelings of isolation. So something to be mindful of is how much you are on social media and the way you're interacting with it. Have people you can talk to. Has come up several times before, but know who your support networks are, your friends and family. And I like that Devin always reminds us to have grace with ourselves, and be gentle with ourselves. All of these are great tips for taking care of our kiddos and other people, but we need to start with ourselves first. There is some information here. Maybe Devin or Raquel, if you could drop that in the chat about some specific resources for help in COVID. Here we also have some more. We have a teen line and it's okay. We have a teen line, and I know we have a text resource available, and then a 24-hour crisis line from Behavioral Wellness as well. And then we do have some additional resources. If you recognize any of these symptoms in yourself or your child that we discussed this evening and thinking, okay, yeah, it's time for me to reach out for some additional support. We're so fortunate in Santa Barbara to have so many wonderful organizations in this community. FSA, we're obviously a part of, and we do have several other services to offer in addition to school-based counseling. We have counseling clinics, we have family workshops and support, parent coaching. We also have FSA therapists at secondary schools, which are junior high and high schools. And then the Mental Wellness Center is another great agency in town that has a lot of virtual groups, resources. Anxiety Canada has a really great website, a lot of worksheets and all kinds of resources available there. And again, we just like to, provide this number. You never know who's going to need it, but here in Santa Barbara County, we have a 24/7 access line for mental health emergencies, and that is 888-868-1649. And then, as always, 911 is available for emergencies as well. I do want to be mindful